Welcome to Transjacked. Victims of the gender industry speak out. Erin Brewer and Maria Keffler of Advocates Protecting Children talk to people whose lives have been upended by gender ideology activism, including parents, teachers, detransitioners, and others who were exploited by unethical doctors, therapists, schools, and activists. Listen to their stories as they describe the damage being wrought on individuals, families, and society by the gender industry. Welcome to Transjacked, Victims of the Gender Industry Speak Out. I'm Maria Keffler.
I'm Erin Brewer.
And today we're here with Abel Garcia, who has a fascinating story to tell us about how he was transjacked by the gender industry. So Abel, welcome. Thank you so much for talking with us today.
Well, thank you very much for having me here.
Do you want to just get started telling us your story? I know I was in a meeting with you on Friday and you told a little bit of it, but if you want to just start from the beginning and tell us what happened.
Yeah, I'll just start from where I started with my transition, how it started. So technically I'm originally from Utah, but I've lived my entire life in California up until a month and a half ago, where I've been in Texas now. But I officially, so I went to see a therapist when I was 18, almost 19 years old. And the first therapist I went to see, she didn't know how to handle a transgender patient. So after, I would assume, 3 sessions with her, she transferred me to her supervisor. After my first session with the supervisor, she automatically told me, yes, I was a transgender woman. And she had my letter to start hormones that same day.
Well, can I just ask a question real quick? The reason that you went to a therapist was that you already thought that you were transgender, or were you going for another reason?
I assumed that it was transgender. I had issues growing up as a kid. If you want, I can explain that before I continue.
Yeah, if you could tell us a little bit about it, that would be helpful because it sounds like your story is a little bit different from many of the stories we hear, which are rapid onset gender dysphoria. And so I'd be really curious to hear about your story.
Sure. I would say, so when I was a kid, I grew up in a Mexican household. I wasn't the most stereotypical young boy growing up. I wasn't aggressive as the others, especially with Mexicans being very masculine. I wasn't that. I was very shy, quiet, reserved to myself. I guess I can consider myself a gender non-conforming kid. This was in the early 2000s, so.
So it sounds like you were kind of gentle and sensitive.
Yes.
Did you ever believe that you were a girl, or did you just feel like you didn't fit the sort of stereotypes of how you were supposed to behave for your culture?
I did not feel like I was adequate enough as a boy. I felt comfortable with being with girls, and for some reason my brain assumed that, well, if I'm not a boy, or if I'm not adequate enough as a boy, I must be a girl. Obviously, being a little kid, not knowing obviously the proper words, I didn't know what that was. I didn't find out what the word transgender was until either freshman year of high school or the last year of middle school, when I was just on YouTube, and YouTube popped up a video on videos to watch, and I don't remember what it was, but it was something regarding to transgenderism. I clicked on it, and well, that's what I guess finally gave me the word that I was looking for.
I'm curious, did you get the message? Do you feel like you got the message from other people around you that something was wrong with you? Or was it just something that you kind of felt like, hey, I'm looking at all the other people around me and I don't feel like I fit?
It was myself. I've always had I'm a very I overthink a lot. So that's usually my worst trait, I would say. So that's
I'm wondering if you had gotten the message from your family that it was okay to be not so macho, a little bit more, reserved. Do you feel like you would have felt more comfortable with yourself?
I would have felt more comfortable if I was told that was an option, but my father, both my parents came here illegally. So my father, my mother were working nonstop when I was a little kid. So I was raised by my grandparents. Eventually, once my father got a good enough job, so my mother could raise us. My father was absent, so I didn't really get to spend much time with my father. My mother, on the other hand, she was overbearing, wouldn't really let us do much.
That sounds hard. Did you have a good relationship with your grandparents?
Yes, I had a good relationship with my grandparents.
Yeah.
It sounds like you didn't have much of a father figure in your life. I wonder how much of that sort of influenced your. I know kids a lot of times sort of learn from their parents, and if all you had was a grandparent and an overbearing mother, it must have been hard for you to sort of figure out who you were in relation to the family.
Yes, that is correct.
So when you finally heard that word, it must have resonated, it sounds like. And is that when you decided that that was what explained who you were?
At the time, it made some sense. Obviously, I didn't act on to that until after I left high school. And then when I left high school, that's when I went to seek the therapist. Like I had started college. I was like, well, am I transgender or not? I don't know. I'm only 18 years old, living with my mother and father.
So the first therapist wasn't able to give you the answer, so she referred you to her supervisor. And you said after the first session,
during the first session, she told me she had my letter to transition already. And when I asked her, she said that she did not want to gatekeep me.
Oh, wow. So she was just willing to push you right into this identity.
That is correct.
Without exploring any underlying issues or potential causes for the feelings that you're having.
That is correct.
Did she ask any of the kind of questions that we were just asking you? Like, tell me about your childhood, tell me about your family. Was there any of that?
Not to my recollection. And I was able to get my records from her, and from what I was able to read, little to nothing, if anything.
It's amazing to me, because then I'm assuming in your kind of heart, you must have thought, oh, well, if the doctor says this is what I need to do, it must be the answer to solve the difficult feelings that you're having.
Yes, like I said, I was just a young adult, Mexican culture. Obviously, because I knew I didn't know enough or I didn't know anything, I took the word of these medical professionals as I assumed they knew everything. Obviously, I was wrong.
So how long did you medically transition? How long were you on cross-sex hormones?
I was on cross-sex hormones from November 2016 until April of 2019. So about 2.5 years, give or take.
And
can you tell us a little?
Oh, I was going to say, during that time you got top surgery, is that correct?
Yes, I got breast implants, and I was also given my letter of approval for my insurance company for bottom surgery, which is a penile inversion. And I had not asked for that.
Oh, wow. So they were really just pushing you.
And that was within the first year and a half.
Wow. I was just going to ask for you to tell us a little bit about those years. What was that like? What was your experience? And what eventually led you to decide that wasn't right for you?
I'd say the first year and a half while I was transitioning up to even medically and past up to the point where I stopped medically transitioning, everything I would say went relatively smooth. Obviously, I would say I looked feminine enough that people assumed that I was a woman. And I guess, to the best of my ability, I was treated like a woman, even though I don't even know what that even means.
I'm wondering, I don't know if this is something you're comfortable asking, but I've talked to some men who have gotten breast implants, and they found them very sexually arousing. And they felt like they were autogynephilic because their sexual interest was not so much for women, but for themselves being women, and that it brought them a lot of sexual pleasure having those breasts. Was that something that you experienced?
I wouldn't say I was an autogynephile. I would say regarding the breast implants, because I felt like at the time that's what I wanted, and I was happy that I got the implants, that I could appear more feminine.
So it allowed you to pass easier.
Yes.
And throughout all this, I mean, I've looked into breast augmentation. When I was younger, I used to be very thin, and I thought that maybe I should get breast implants to appear more feminine because I didn't feel very feminine. And it's expensive. So I'm wondering, did your insurance cover all this, the hormones and the surgeries?
Yes, my insurance covered everything. They were not willing to cover the implants to be removed when I decided I wanted to detransition. I don't know the full cost of everything. The closest I think I ever got to an estimate was from the surgeon who gave me the implants, removed the implants, and reconstructed my chest. He said it was going to be about $3,000 just to remove them, including the hospital fees.
Was
So I
that
like
3,000 or 30,000?
3,000.
3,000. Okay.
So
I would
I'll
go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I'm not sure if that's gonna be, if the price would have been more since my insurance covers it, and or if it would have been less. I don't know.
Well, and that's something that we've talked to detransitioners about, is how easy it was for them to get the treatments so that they could appear more feminine or more masculine. But when they reclaimed themselves and wanted to go back to the way they were before the transition, the insurance companies and the doctors didn't support that. And so that's really, it sounds like the experience you had as well.
Yes, that is correct. When I finally wanted to detransition, by the time I wanted to detransition, I was no longer seeing the second therapist who was the supervisor. I had asked the health clinic that I was attending if they had a therapist on site, which they did. I had spoken to him. I told him, hey, I'm thinking about detransitioning. He would not let me detransition. I realized pretty quickly that he was a gay man, and that he had what seemed to me had an agenda on not letting me detransition.
So when you say he wouldn't let you detransition, what did that look like? Did he just say, I'm not going to give you referrals? I'm not going to talk to you anymore? What did he do?
So he continued to see me. At the time that I was transitioning and I decided to detransition, I had failed the police academy, and I was actually taking a break from that. And at the time, I knew the military did not allow people who were transgender. So my only option, which was it was a terrible option, was to try to join the military. And due to the ban on transgender individuals, that would have had to force me to detransition. That was my excuse to the therapist, to the third one. He had told me, do not detransition, do not join the military, just go straight to law enforcement as a transgender woman.
So what can you describe the feelings that you had when you decided to detransition, and what it was that was going on that caused you to, I mean, it sounds like you were pushing it against the therapist. Probably it's hard to admit that you weren't actually a woman. So can you just sort of explore that with us?
Sure. When I was with with this therapist, I never outright admitted that I wanted to detransition because I realized I made a mistake. I never told him that. I tried to use the military as an excuse, but he wouldn't let me leave. um,
I just want to say that's really impressive to me that even with a therapist telling you no, that you still pushed forward. So I'd be so curious to know like what was going on in your head.
Well, I'd like to interject real quick too, that I don't think that's ever the role of a therapist to tell you what to do. That's one of the things in many licensing programs to get licensed as a therapist, as a counselor, is that you don't tell your patient, your client what to do. You help them explore the options. So you're not the only one we've heard this from, that therapists are telling them, you do this, don't do that. And I just want to highlight that's not good therapy. So sorry, go ahead, Abel. I want to hear the rest of your story.
sure. But I was gonna say the part where I realized where I made a mistake. Actually, that was actually part of my conscience from the beginning, even before I transitioned. The reason why I say that is because before I did anything, I did have a part of my conscience saying this might be a bad mistake. So I gave myself somewhat of a timeline on my transition. I gave myself 5 years to before I wanted to get breast implants, which I broke that one. um, but I also gave myself 10 years for bottom surgery because I knew that one was way more permanent. And luckily, I stuck to my guns on that one.
That's really wise.
Yeah, I bet I can't imagine the kind of relief that you have knowing that you had already gotten approval and how easy it would have been for people just to push you in that direction.
Well, when I got my letter for approval, I didn't even know what it was for the bottom surgery because I had only requested uh, the top surgery, which was the implants. I was home and I got a letter from the mail. I was like 2 letters from my insurance. I was like, that's weird. They normally just send one, but okay. So I read both of them. I'm confused on the bottom one. And I realized that one of them was for the breast implants. I had to talk to a few friends like, hey, what the hell is this? And they said, we looked into it. It's like, oh shit, that's a bottom surgery. It's like, oh, I did not ask for that.
Wow.
That's amazing that they've clearly got a path all planned out.
Well, and it's shocking to me because I have insurance and I have some medical issues, and it's incredibly hard for me to even get approval for certain medications. And to me, the fact that they would just go ahead and pre-approve you without you even asking just shows how much they've bought into this ideology, and it's not based on health or well-being. It's based on this goal of getting people transitioned. And I'm thankful that they didn't do it both at the same time, because I have heard of people who have gone in and gotten both the breast augmentation and the penile inversion at the same time.
Wow.
So how did it feel, sort of recognizing the mistake and then advocating for yourself to sort of reclaim who you are?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that one more time?
Yeah, I was just wondering how it felt to start advocating for yourself and accepting who you really are rather than this, false identity that you had developed.
So to accept myself, that's actually not hard. After eventually I quit the third therapist and I got a new one, a fourth one. I'll talk about him in a minute. But after seeing him since September 2019 up to technically last week, and talking to another friend of mine who's also a detransitioner, but this is a female to male detransitioner. I've accepted I was always a man, even when I was living the lifestyle as a transgender. I was just lying to myself. So I didn't really need to accept myself since I already was a man. I just had to realize I was living a life of lies.
Mm.
But
How were your relationships at this time? I'm thinking like with friends and with family. When you transitioned and then detransitioned, did you feel supported? Did you feel struggles with your relationships?
that one, for the relationships with family, that was a little tougher. Because it's for family, everyone still supported me, but I
Mm.
eventually was told, yeah, half of the family did not like that,
Mhm.
which I don't blame them.
Yeah.
But they were all glad that I returned back as their son, nephew, cousin, grandson.
Yeah.
That took a while though.
I bet they were so happy to have you back, though.
Mm.
They were
Um,
very happy.
how 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 have you sort of resolved the feeling of maybe not being a gender conforming male in your culture with accepting yourself now for who you are?
Repeat that one more time. Sorry.
Okay. I was just wondering how you, initially you talked about how your culture had, you hadn't fit in very well as a male in your culture. How are you doing now?
I feel like I'm doing much better now. One thing I've learned to accept is that I'm not really, even though I'm first generation American of Mexican descent, I don't really know my culture Mexican wise.
Mhm.
So I'm more American. So I feel like that's might have been a part of it. It's like
Mm.
American by birth, Mexican by blood. So I didn't really
Mm.
know my culture, even though I grew up at Mexican.
Mm.
What advice would you have for little boys who are feeling the way you did?
What advice would I have for little boys? I would say just be yourself, honestly. Like it's hard, but as long as you don't medically do anything, medical procedures, medication, because people around you are telling you that, oh, you're not a stereotypical boy, you're obviously a girl. Obviously don't listen to them.
I think what's so sad is I think all kids struggle with who am I? I don't fit in. My family isn't perfect. I mean, in my family, I see this with my kids. They've all struggled with different things. And my youngest would like all of the rest of us in the family to be a little different than we are, to make her happy. But I think all kids struggle with not feeling like things are the way they should be. But now doctors and therapists and teachers are telling them, oh, anything that makes you uncomfortable makes you transgender. And I think you're right, Abel. I think that's a message we need to push back on, that you're okay the way you are. And everybody feels this way at one time or another.
It's interesting you say that, Maria, because I was thinking about in the late 80s, early 90s, there were a lot of things going around in books and in journals and all sorts, sort of in the common culture, that if you were depressed and anxious and had, sort of this list of symptoms, it was an indication that you were sexually assaulted or sexually
Mhm.
abused. And if you didn't remember it, it was because you'd repressed those memories. And there was this whole explanation for, and so, you know, girl after girl, woman after woman read this and went, oh, I must have been sexually assaulted or sexually abused. And they'd go to therapy, and the therapist would, do all this work to bring back the memories. And if they didn't remember anything, then the therapist said that was an indication that they had repressed memories. And it's, anyway, it seems so similar now to what's happening with the transgender ideology, in that teenage girls and young adults struggle. That's part of the period of moving from child to adult, is anxiety, depression, feeling uncomfortable. All of that is really normal. But what's dangerous is when somebody comes along and says, oh, well, the reason you're feeling this way is because of X, Y, or Z, and not because this is a normal experience. And it sounds like in your case, Abel, if somebody had just said, you know, these feelings that you're having are pretty natural and normal. Let's see how we can support you and teach you some skills to get through this, rather than to put you on hormones and cut, you know, add body parts and such.
Mm.
Honestly, I wish someone would have said that to me, but sometimes I have to learn the hard way in life.
We all have those places that we had to learn the hard way. I'm glad you've come through it, and I'm glad that you're in a healthier place. And how are you physically now? Have you had any long-term effects from the years you were medicalized?
I don't know the full extent of the damages done to my body, honestly. Since I just moved here to Texas, I just got a job a few weeks ago. I just got health insurance, and I'm just waiting for the insurance to get approved so I can go see a doctor, even though I kind of don't really trust him that much right now. But I'm willing to go see one after recommendations through some people that I've met here in Texas. There are some things I can't verify already that I have damages done. Not to be too graphic, and I try not to be too vulgar, but my genitals, they have atrophied.
Mm,
So for people who don't know what that means, it just means that they've shrunk in size.
mm,
Um, because of that, I don't know what's the status of my fertility,
mm.
and that's obviously the main concern I have.
Yeah, because you want to be able to have children.
Eh, Originally, I wanted 4, but I'd be grateful for 1.
Mm,
Well, and I
But
think the fact that you started it after having gone through puberty, there's hope.
mm,
well, I can only hope so.
yeah.
How does that feel to have wanted children and to know you may not be able to have them?
Well, sadly, I usually just keep all my emotions bottled up. Well, we'll find out once I go see a doctor. It might be joy, or it might be rage.
Mm,
And if it's rage, I already know what I'm doing for that day.
Do you have you considered, I mean, there are increasingly lawyers who are trying to find people like you who have been damaged. Have you been in contact with anybody to see if there's any kind of way you can hold those doctors accountable for the harm they've done?
I have spoken to a few people who have lawyers in California. One of them said the statute of limitation has passed for me. The other one said about the same thing. She's not 100% sure, but it's more than likely statute of limitation has passed.
mm,
That just it's so infuriating because in your situation, the harms that you have aren't realized until after detransitioning. And so it seems like it seems incredibly unfair to have a statute of limitations um, for this situation. And I know that's one of the legislative efforts that's going on, is to try and introduce legislation so that people like you can sue once they detransition and realize the harm that's been done.
I think I don't know how that law will be changed.
Yeah.
As of now, to my knowledge, I only know of 3D transitioners in California, me included. Obviously, you know the one of them, Chloe, who was at the event on Friday.
For those who don't know, this is Chloe. I think it's Chloe Clark. Chloe
Uh,
Cole. Chloe Cole.
Cole,
Yeah,
Cole.
and she started on puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones as a young teenager. Had a double mastectomy. She's now 17 and realized it was a huge mistake. And it's, you know, hearing your story, Abel, and Chloe's story, And I'm hearing increasing, stories from California where people are just, California seems to be at the spearhead of this, where they're just, you know, en masse transitioning children and young adults.
They are.
Do you know the other person? You said there were 3.
Yeah, she's another friend of mine. She's public about her detransition, her transition, detransition. She goes by the name of Kat Caddison.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I've heard of her.
Yeah.
Well, and one thing that I just want to thank you and Chloe and Kat for is speaking out, because even if you aren't, able to get any legal justice, what you're doing now can help children, and especially young boys like you were, maybe stop and think before moving forward with these really damaging interventions.
And this is exactly what we're trying to do. This is why we're doing videos and interviews like this with you, in the hopes that the next child who looks online to find out if they're transgender may come across this video instead of the one that takes them down the deceptive path toward transition. So thank you for helping us to create more content that might help protect and save future kids.
Well, I do appreciate you two giving me the opportunity to speak. But I wasn't done on all the known damages.
Please.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and I have yet to bring up therapist number 4.
Oh, well, tell us.
Okay, yeah, do.
But like I said, other damage, like I said, to my body besides the atrophy, one issue I have with my genitals is every time I try to use the restroom, it takes me a couple an extra minute or two to relieve myself, due to obviously the size shrinkage. It's really hard to relieve myself, and there is a lot of dripping.
And I'm going to be kind of graphic here just so that the audience really understands what you're saying, Abel, because I have heard this over and over and over again from men like you. And that is that the hormones and or puberty blockers that they take have shrunk their genitals, which includes the urethra, but their bladder is an adult sized bladder. And so you're trying to empty an adult sized bladder through, a much smaller and maybe even child sized genitals and urethra. And this causes urinary tract infections, difficulty emptying, dripping. And the audience, I want them to understand this, because I think sometimes we hear about the complications, but don't have a visual for it. And I think in this case, as hard as it is to talk about, having that visual of an adult bladder trying to empty through a child-sized urethra and the complications that causes is important for people to see.
And these are some things most people aren't really aware of, especially when they try to transition. I don't even think that I wasn't even told anything of any harmful effects, because I know California does informed consent.
Which is not really informed. It's
No.
not really informed because you don't know.
All they tell you is exactly what you want to hear. That these hormones, these surgeries will turn you, if you're a man, will turn you into a woman, and you couldn't even tell the difference in a few years down the line.
Yeah, I talked to a young woman recently who is a detransitioner, and she said in the high school GSA club, the Gender Sexuality Allies Club, they all talked about hormones and how great it was going to be when they could get on hormones. She said there was no adult in the room and nobody knew any bad side effects. They just all thought, oh, if I'm a girl and I take testosterone, poof, I'm going to turn into a boy, and vice versa. And she said nobody knew anything about bad side effects or damaging effects. And I'm just gobsmacked. I'm just gobsmacked that this is what's happening to children.
Well, whether it's a negligent or malicious intent, these doctors aren't telling the full truth.
So do you have any other issues?
I have to assume this happened after I started transitioning. I don't know what's causing this. I don't know if it's nerve damage or what it is. But I, from time to time, the left half of my body will shake on its own uncontrollably.
Mm.
Luckily, at this point, I'm able to realize when it happens. So I usually have about a second or two before my body shakes on its own.
Hmm.
It actually happened during our interview on Friday. It was right before everything happened, but I think they caught that on camera.
Oh, wow.
That almost sounds like a seizure, like a form of a seizure.
Yeah, I wouldn't know if that's a seizure or not. Usually, my left shoulder will usually go up, and I usually try to stop it by putting my head like this
Mm.
to stop most of the shaking.
How often does that happen?
Um, what it's random. I don't really know how often it happens. I just usually right before it happens, I know it's coming.
Mm. Mm.
And do you have, I'm thinking you had a lot of surgery on your chest. Do you have any pain or muscle weakness or nerve damage?
I've lost nerve around my nipples and part of my chest. I poke myself and I don't feel anything. I would assume if you stabbed me near my nipples, I wouldn't feel it. I haven't tried it. And I kind of don't want to though.
No.
And my nipples do not look the same as they used to. I don't know if it'd be too graphic to show on camera.
It's up to you. Yeah.
I'll show, but I'll let you two decide.
I don't think that looks bad.
It just probably looks really different than what it used to look.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, just based on the way the scarring is, if people mistaken you for a woman who's transitioned to a man, because those are those are the kinds of scars that women who have their breast removed have.
I wouldn't know as of right now, just because most people who I talk to, if I do go shirtless, already know I'm a detransitioner.
Mm.
I saw a video that you made, I don't think it was that long ago, where you were talking about having your chest reconstructed because the breast implants changed your chest structure so much.
Yeah, so because I was also a little fat growing up, hormones obviously, the estrogen gave me breast tissue,
Mm.
and the implants, they left excess skin, so I had developed gynecomastia. For I'm not sure if your viewers know what that means, but it just it means man boobs,
Mm.
male breasts, however you want to call it.
Because the estrogen does stimulate that growth, even in male bodies. And so presumably your risk of breast cancer, if you're on estrogen for a while, goes up even if you're a male.
I would assume so, but I don't know for myself. I was only on it for about 2.5 years.
It's amazing to me the kinds of consequences that your body had for you being on it just for 2 years after having gone through puberty. And you weren't on puberty blockers, were you?
No.
Wow. So you had that kind of atrophying just from being on the estrogen.
It was a combination of estrogen and wearing tight clothing to minimize any bulging show.
And if this is too personal question, please just let me know. But I'm curious if you know if this has impacted your sexual function.
I don't really know. I'm single, so I'm not dating anyone. Didn't really like a lot of people in California, and I just moved here to Texas, so
That'll be another thing that you'll have to let us know about. Maybe in a year we could do another interview and see how you're doing.
Oh yeah, I'd love to do a second video, especially if I get a girlfriend. Yeah, hopefully she
I
knows
did-
more about me before I know anything about her, so she'd be aware.
And you wanted to tell us about your fourth therapist too.
Yes, my fourth and final therapist that I had in California before I left. Um, so I actually found him because I knew a friend of his, another detransitioner by the name of Walt Heyer.
Mhm.
I had found Walt online. He had been doing YouTube videos as interviews with other people. And one day I just sent him an email saying, "Hey, my name is Abel Garcia. I live in Southern California. I'm trying to detransition, but I'm having a hard time finding a therapist."
Mm.
He had replied back to me saying, because I had told him exactly where I'm at in California. And he said he has a friend in the same area that's actually a therapist and that he'd be willing to work with me. I just have to tell the therapist that I was sent by Walt Heyer.
Mm.
So once I found out where the therapist was working at, I went to his office. I went multiple times because either he wasn't there or he was busy with a client, and it was hard to get a hold of. Eventually, I got lucky one day. I think it was in between when he had a couple patients, and he gave me 5 minutes to ask him a few questions, tell him I was sent by Walt, and I wanted to detransition. Obviously, after I told him everything, he took me as a client. On our first session, he told me, due to the fact that it's California and I want to detransition, everything that we are doing moving forward was of my own choice and nothing was influenced by him, because if the state of California were to find out, they would strip him of his license under and accuse him of conversion therapy.
Mhm.
The irony there, considering that it sounds like your doctor and your other therapists did engage in conversion therapy, that they converted you into believing that you were something that you weren't.
That is correct. All the other therapists led me to believe that I could become a woman. And that's okay from the state, and they'll cover everything. They'll have everything prepared for me. But the minute I want to detransition, I had so many roadblocks. I couldn't even do much. Note that in order to get the implants removed, I had to get 2 medical providers to sign off on it. One of them was my therapist, and the other one I had to go find. Because this was also during COVID-19, it made it a little difficult to find a therapist. Well, not a therapist, but another medical provider to sign off on it. My insurance had given me a few options on who took my insurance and would be willing to have a conversation with me. The first person I got was, I guess it was only a nurse, which was odd because that's not what the insurance had told me. They had told me when I went to see him, I told him, "Hey, I'm Abel Garcia. I'm a detransitioner. I'm trying to go back to being a man, but I need another medical provider to sign off on me." He told me he's only a nurse, but to apply with his to the medical profession above him. I had to obviously call my insurance for that one, say, "Hey, you guys gave me the wrong information. I need to see this other guy." Again, due to COVID, a lot of medical professionals were not taking new clients. I had to bug the living out of this guy and the other nurses that were working the front desk. Eventually, again, the same thing as as my last therapist. He gave me a few minutes to let me explain my case. He said fine, he'd take me as a client, and I think I only had one session with him, because I think I was so persistent. He knew I just wanted to get this over with.
Mm.
He asked me a couple questions. Me not realizing what he was trying to say, did not answer as exactly the way he wanted to.
Mm.
Eventually, he had given me a few hints without saying anything, and then I caught the hint. And by the end of the session, he was able to sign off on me to get my implants removed.
Mm.
Once I got both letters from both medical professionals, I submitted them both to my insurance. My insurance did not appreciate that, and they denied my request for the implants to be removed.
But they covered it to have them put in,
Exactly.
but not to have them removed.
Luckily, I appealed the decision, and I had to wait about a little over 30 days to get a response from the insurance company. Eventually, I got a response. I think it was either right before 30 days or a few days after 30 days. They said they'll cover it, which was a good thing.
Yeah.
I got that's it. Then I had to go get a surgeon to remove the implants, which was the same surgeon who gave me the implants. He was confused on why he was coming back for removal. I told him the truth, like, hey, I made a mistake. This ain't for me. It was understand. He understood what I realized I made a mistake, so he helped me. So yeah, no, I got the implants removed December of 2020. And then from there, I waited all the way up till February of this year to get the implants not the implants, but have my chest reconstructed by the same surgeon. In between that time, obviously, because I had excess skin, I had to wear a binder just to make my chest look somewhat normal, which I think has caused some permanent damage because I've noticed I do have sometimes I do have a hard time breathing.
It sounds like you have really been through it. This has been a really, really difficult journey for you.
It's been difficult, but I'm pushing forward because I know if that at least me speaking out about this, if I can at least save a few people, that'll be good enough for me. And
I think
so
that's
far,
I think that's what you're doing. I'm sorry to interrupt you. I think that's what you're doing is helping people. Please go ahead.
I've actually have actually helped a few people already. On the first interview I ever did about 2.5 years ago, I actually just received a message a few weeks ago, about 2.5 weeks ago, from someone who was transgender, and I don't know if it's a male to female, female to male. But when the video was originally released, they didn't like the interview, calling it propaganda and all that. But a few weeks ago, they just replied back saying like, "Hey, after it's been so many months since I sent the message, I realized I made a mistake as well, and your video helped me out."
Oh, wow.
That's huge.
Well, and I suspect that's going to be the case more and more often now, as we know, California is introducing legislation that will allow them to be essentially a sanctuary state for people who want to have their children medically transitioned. And in a couple of years, those kids are really going to need somebody like you as a role model so that they know that they can detransition and that there is hope on the other side. Because I think that I mean, just talking to you, you have such a gentle spirit, and I'm just encouraged by where you are, and wondering if you feel like you're kind of on the right path now, and that your life is where you want it to be.
I think my life is going a better route. Obviously, I'm barely seeing some of my work being realized with this young person reaching out back to me. Another detransitioner that I actually got to meet, I think a week or two ago, here in Austin, Texas. He actually had also told me that my video was the one that I did about 2.5 years ago was also helped him realize he made a mistake.
Well, as we're finishing up here, Abel, is there anything else that you want to say? If sort of had, know that people are going to be listening, if there's a message that you want to get out there?
Let me think real quick. I would just say to any relatives who have someone who has to parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, brothers, sisters, whoever you are, if you have someone in your family that wants to transition or is already in the current process of transitioning, my DMs are always open for anyone if you want to chat with me. I've been in communication with enough parents about this. I know I don't have all the answers, but I am in the connection with other detransitioners. So at least if I don't have the answers, they'll have the answers. For anyone who's thinking of doing what I did, don't, please don't. Like, I just straight up no, not even a choice. Yeah, I will say yes. All the hormones, all the surgeries, all the love affection that you'll be getting in the short term will be good, but in the long term, it's not gonna be good. Obviously, you'll, depending on how long you're on hormones, you'll be chemically castrated. If you go with surgery, obviously you'll be castrated. We don't know the full extent of the damages these hormones do to people. Just from what I've noticed with other detransitioners, some of them have scoliosis, bone density issues. Obviously, I probably have developed seizures or at least some nerve damage. I know if you get the full bottom surgery, there are a couple examples online of how bad it can get. But no matter who you are, if you want someone to talk to, my DMs are always open.
And we'll put that information in the description below. And Abel, I just want to say that is just wonderful that you're willing to be a resource for people, because there's such a need for parents and anybody who's going down this path to be able to reach out to someone who's been through it and hash it out. And I think that you can save a lot of heartache for a lot of people.
Well, hopefully I'm able to save more people. Preferably, I'd rather them not do any type of transitioning. Is that if they do it, if they start, obviously there's going to be some damages into their bodies in the long run.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing your story and your struggles, and yes, for doing what you're doing to help protect others. So we really appreciate you.
Well, I do appreciate you too for giving me the opportunity to speak here.